Hi there, Dr. McQueenie here again, and welcome to week 2 of PA 315. I hope that all of you who tried to add the class got in, and that we have a full class at this time. I'm looking forward to the rest of the semester. As I said in the announcement, I did really enjoy the discussions. It's very meaningful to me that you could look at the frontline video and indicate that it triggered some fairly strong reaction and emotions in you, and that you're very comfortable sharing them with the class. If there is one takeaway from me for this class, is that you learn the essentials of business and government, which you will, but that you come to understand the need for critical thinking in all kinds of things related to this topic. There's so much that goes beyond common understanding, and I think the video pointed that out. I mean, most of you look at your credit card as something the bank gives you and something you feel privileged for. I'm not sure how many of you understood the extent to which credit card is part of a business operation. It's part of a focused effort to achieve certain kinds of financial outcomes, and those outcomes have significant consequences in the lives of an awful lot of people. Part of our effort in the university education is to get you used to asking those kinds of questions and not being satisfied with a rhetorical answer or a consensus answer or a opposition answer, but only with an answer that makes sense to you when you've asked the question, why is this so? And how is that happening? And how can that be? It doesn't make sense. And to keep probing. We'll be doing that with most of the topics this year. I've added a bullet to the, I guess they call it the module, on the left-hand side of the homepage, which says Ask the Professor, and I would urge you to take advantage of that. I've done that in some of my other online questions, and it really works well. It's a vehicle to ask a question and begin a dialogue on something that's not specifically tied to a discussion question. It may not specifically be tied to a matter that we're talking about in class, but it's of pretty significant interest to you and to the whole class. It could be an administrative matter that's bothering you. It could be some kind of conceptual issue. But the likelihood is that if you have a problem and a concern, others do. And I found that if you can just start a discussion with an Ask the Professor button, you see an awful lot of people would chip in and say, I've wondered about that too, I think about that too, I'm concerned about that too. And we can, again, begin the dialogue on those things. It's really important that as we go forward, you understand what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, and what your expectations are. So whenever it gets cloudy, I want you to click the button on the Ask the Professor button, and I'll do my best to get to that. I will look at that button every single day, and I urge you to take advantage of it. I'm going to do a couple of quick administrative things, then I want to talk a little bit about the substantive assignments this week. I would like you to do the reading as indicated in the syllabus, both the text, tremendous introductory chapters on some of the issues about business and government. I've added an introductory chapter to one of my favorite textbooks on government by James Q. Wilson. It's 9 pages that deals with just some of the fundamental questions about government and democracy. I'd like you to look at it as an overview and decide yourself whether you want to follow up on that in the expanded reading list I gave you. But for this class, I think it's important that you at least read those 9 pages and be able to be comfortable with the kinds of questions that Professor Wilson is asking of his students. And then finally, the book Mega Communities, which is something that is very important to me. I have it right here, a copy of it. I'm not going to ask you to buy it, but I am going to Xerox some pages. I haven't been able to do it yet. I'm going to actually run out this evening and Xerox the pages and try and post them tomorrow morning, because that's a book that talks about some of the significant issues that we face when business and government cannot come up with solutions on cross-cutting problems. And for that issue and that question, which was first raised at a discussion in the Aspen Institute in 2006, will form an awful lot of the critical thinking that I want to put forth in this class. I'll talk about that at the end of the video, or at least in part 2 of the video. Going through a couple of administrative things, the annotated bibliographies, we haven't really kicked them off yet. I'm waiting for you all to get in and get used to using the application, the software, the discussions before we get really structured. But I would like to begin using those this week. My purpose for the annotated bibliography is 2 things. It's to give you a vehicle by which you can record the reading that you've done. and be able to look at it yourself, have a historical record of it, and submit it to me to be able to give you credit for doing the extra reading that I've asked you to do. Number two, it's a very good vehicle for you to be taking into your groups for group discussions, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We will be working in working groups very soon. And number three, I'd like you to submit them to me at the semester break and at the end of the semester, during the final exam week. And I'll be using those as a major part of your class participation. It will document what you've read and what you think and what you now learn. And I think it's going to be a better way of learning how to brief a document than what might be a typical essay or a paper narrative. It's beginning to, and we'll work on this, it's beginning to capture critical pieces of information so we can succinctly talk about the article, the purpose of the article, the major points that were made, and what you took away from it. And we'll be working on that throughout the semester. So there's going to be two different forms for the bibliography that I want you to create. One will be the one you have. As I said, I would like you to complete that for the frontline article and use that for discussions we may have between now and the midterm. I'd like you to keep them all and submit them as a group right during the midterm week. I will give you written instructions on this, and I'll hand them out by the end of the week. But for now, just as you do a reading assignment on a topical question or a news item, the form that I gave you is the one I'd like you to complete as you've done the reading or as you've watched the video. There'll be a second form that I'll pass out this week, which will be similar, except it's going to be on those reference materials and the reference reading, where there isn't really a problem to solve or there really was an issue, it's just general knowledge. I'd like you to capture again what you've read, so when you read it, how much you read, what you took away from it, what you thought were the interesting points. So again, we have a record, both you and I, of the extra reading that you've done in the class and how perhaps you could apply it. So that will come along as the weeks progress. You'll see the benefit of that. But right now, as I ask you to read something, not your text, not the assigned reading, but the extra stuff, the news articles or the videos or the extra reference material that's in the bibliography, I'd like you to capture what you read in those forms. And again, there'll be some written material to follow on that. I have a list here that I'm going through. In terms of the syllabus, I hope that you're comfortable with that. If you're not, you can use the Ask Professor button because it's fairly straightforward, as we said in the first class. The syllabus is broken into two portions of the semester. The first one goes through the midterm, and then following the midterm, we take on a variety of substantive issues. At this point in time, we're doing basically background reading to set us up for the kinds of analysis I want to perform in the second half of the class. So beginning this week, the readings that you have in your textbook and in the supplemental reading will get to the heart of some of the matters and understanding business and government, how it works, and what the issues are. Next week, week 3, we're going to break into groups for the first time. I've given you 2 weeks to get used to each other. And I'm going to pass out another instruction that talks about the groups, and I'm going to ask you to indicate to me the group topic that you'd like to work in. I'd like 2 things from you this week. I'd like I'd like you to identify the group that you're most comfortable working with, the group name, and I'll explain that in a second. And I would also like you to indicate whether or not you'd like to be a group leader. We're going to need leaders for each of the groups, people to facilitate the meetings, to carry the messages, to sort of just coordinate the activity. And some people do a very good job of that, and of course I will give some extra credit to those that participate. You'll get a paper from me again tomorrow, which will identify the topics of the groups, but they're going to be the substantive topics that we're going to be working on the second half of the semester. So you can refer to the syllabus, and you can see that we're going to have a budget group, and we're going to have a financial institutions group. We're going to have a group on cybersecurity, probably energy policy. We're going to have a group on healthcare. And I'd like you to indicate which of those you'd like to work on. Now, I haven't sent it out yet because I'm still familiarizing myself with the Blackboard software as well. And I think the way to do this is to post a collaborative document. and just a chart in which we can identify, you can fill in your name under the group that you want, and we get one copy of it rather than people me receiving 60 emails and 60 posts of where you want to work. So give me 24 hours. See if I can find a collaborative document space in there. And I'll post the groups with empty spaces, and I'll ask you to just put your name in the place where you want to work and give it a star if you'd like to be a group leader. Okay? That should work pretty well. And like I said, those who get to be group leaders, want to be group leaders and do good work, I usually give them up to 5 points of extra credit, and that often does make a difference between an A and a B. Okay.